Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ryan Retro channel. In today's video we're going to be looking at Windows gaming on the Retroid Pocket 6 using GameHub. Some of these will be Steam games, some of them will be imported into the SD card, and as the video goes along, the games are going to be getting more complicated to run. We're going to start with games that should theoretically be quite easy to run. We're going to try some games that are a medium level of difficulty to run, and then at the end of the video we'll get into the really big hitters, the AAA games that are going to really stress the system. So make sure you keep watching till the end to see how all of these games go, see when we run into bottlenecks and problems, and see how truly powerful the Retroid Pocket 6 is. This is the 12 gigabytes of RAM version, and we're going to be running all of these games in high performance mode. If you'd like to know how to get the best performance out of GameHub, I did upload a video about this recently, about how to get the best FPS. I'll be following that guide for this video, so I'll assume you have watched it in its entirety, and now let's jump into the test, beginning with the easy games. Our first game today is Dispatch. We're beginning this series today with visual novels, games where you're basically just watching an animation or a story unfold, and you're able to make decisions that determine how the game plays out. It'll be no surprise to hear that we get a smooth 60 frames per second here, as we're mostly just basically watching a movie. I just picked up this game after seeing so many people rave about it, and I'm only in the very first beginning of the game, the first mission, the first storyline, and I'm really enjoying it. I even set this up on the TV earlier using the official Retroid dock, and it looked glorious on the big screen. If you like to play Dispatch, it seems that it runs absolutely perfectly here. Now, I am in the beginning of the game, so I'm not sure if it develops into a much more complicated game later, but I believe it follows mostly the same path. So I can, at least for now, recommend picking this up and giving it a go. It's a gorgeous game, and it just really shows how far GameHub has come, that we can just so easily set up a game, and it just runs at 60 frames per second. Our next game, yet another visual novel, is Coffee Talk. As the name suggests, you talk to people and brew them coffee. It's a great game for unwinding, and that's actually why the game was made, with unwinding and relaxing in mind. You talk to the interesting characters who come along to your cafe. They range from pretty regular people to monsters and everything in between. And you brew them up some drinks. I was all prepared to say you brew them up some coffee, as the name Coffee Talk suggests, and then this woman literally came in and said anything except for coffee. So blame this woman for ruining not only my video, but also the name of the game. She is the devil. Anyway, she said that she wants something with chocolate in, so I'm just going to give her tons of chocolate powder. Chocolate, chocolate, and more chocolate. And I really like the kind of brewing animation in this game. It's quite satisfying. It's really cute. The art style's nice. The sound is also great. If I turn up the volume, it's got a really cool lo-fi track going in the background. 1 cup of chocolatey goodness. It's just such a chill game, and needless to say, runs perfectly at 60 frames per second, locked, sipping power, even on high performance mode. I don't think the fan has even turned on, it's silent here. This is going to be a great experience. Of course, for games like this, we usually have them on things like Switch and ports on other consoles as well. But if you do have these little indie games that you play on PC, they're going to run great here. So now let's level it up a bit to the next notch on our progress bar. From the visual novel, let's move on to the organizer game category. These are games where you organize a space. They're usually quite mouse focused. This one, Unpacking, which is a fantastic game by the way, does have a controller function where the analog stick basically just acts like a mouse, and you're able to unpack your boxes and organize them neatly in the room. For anyone who hasn't played this game before, it's really nice. It starts out in 1997 and progresses through the years, and you'll see the rooms change as your character gets older and moves home, and you're even able to piece together a storyline based on the pictures on the walls and what happens. It's really, really great. Your task is just simply to organize things however you like, but if you do put them in a really silly way, it will make you go back and actually organize them in a way that makes sense. So if I were to put this picture frame here in somewhere really weird, like on top of the bed, it might make me go back and change that later, because that doesn't make any sense at all. You just have to unpack your boxes every time you move home or move room in a way that makes sense. And it's once again just a really relaxing game that's easily going to hit and sit at a super smooth 60 frames per second. No problems, no questions asked. But it's a bit more interactive than just the visual novels where you're pretty much watching a video. Here you're constantly interacting, doing something, but not in a way that's going to stress the 8 Gen 2 processor in the Retroid Pocket 6. In the same vein as Unpacking, we have the next game a little to the left. This is a puzzle game where you have to line up and organize things, and every level is totally different. Again, I think this game is maybe available on Android, so we wouldn't necessarily need the PC version, but if you're someone like me who already bought the PC version on your Steam Deck and you just have it lying around anyway, it works really well. Again, it's kind of touch and mouse based originally, and we can use the on-screen touchpad for any of these things. It works pretty nicely. But if you'd like to, it does have full gamepad support, and that's the way I would like to do it, using the left analog stick and the face buttons. With my left stick up top variant of the Retroid Pocket 6, I find this really comfortable to use. It's very similar to Unpacking in that it's relaxing and you're controlling a mouse with the stick, but this one's a bit more varied. Whereas Unpacking is the same every single level, just progressing through a kind of storyline, unpacking different rooms. This one, every level is a little bit different, and you need to figure out what you're meant to be doing, but it's all very simple stuff. Here, for example, we seem to just be making these frames nice and straight. So yet again, another game that's great for just sitting back and relaxing and unwinding. We're now going to move on to our next category of games, again getting slightly more difficult to run. We're now going to look at the side-scroller category, the games where there are a lot more involved than the previous ones. These games are still very simplistic in their looks and how easy they are to run, but they involve some side-scrolling elements. We're now moving left and right. This first one is called Cast and Chill. It's as you can imagine from the name, a very chill fishing game. You just go out and row your boat along the stream, find a nice place to stop and catch some fish. It's got some lovely visuals, really relaxing sound effects. It's a super chill little game that looks great and is also quite cheap to pick up as well. A very similar game to that is Dave the Diver, one that's really popular. I've put a lot of time into this game on my Nintendo Switch. Here on the PC version, I'm unfortunately being forced to play the tutorial all over again. The frame rate on this one also fluctuates a little bit sometimes, but you'll mostly get a smooth 60 frames per second, as should be expected with a simple game like this. It looks fantastic and it's really addictive. Where Cast and Chill was a really chill game, this one is definitely more addictive and you can spend a really long time playing Dave the Diver, believe me. If you are looking for a machine to play Dave the Diver on, the Retroid Pocket 6 will handle it beautifully. Our next game is Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, one of my favourite games to play on these devices, especially the lower end ones. On this one, I've uncapped the frame rate and you can see we have well over 100 frames per second. So just like the other ones, no worries whatsoever getting 60 frames per second. And you can even get 120 frames per second or thereabouts on this one. Because remember, we do have a 120 Hz screen here on the Retroid Pocket 6. Although for me, all of these games just look absolutely fine and great even at 60 Hz. For the first time now, I can hear the fan ramping up in the Retroid Pocket 6. It wasn't with any of the other games. This is a beautiful looking game, and if you are only interested in playing at 60 Hz, you can crank this one and all the previous ones up to 1080p, no problems. Maybe the only game I showed so far today that may struggle a bit at 1080p would be Dave the Diver and potentially Dispatch, but all of the other ones are easily going to run at 1080p, and they'll probably all run okay at 1080p. I personally just use 720p for all of these games because on a 5.5 inch screen, I don't really notice any difference. Our next game is Hollow Knight Silksong, probably the most popular side-scrolling style game of the past few years. And from now on out for the rest of the video, we're going to be unlocking the frame rate and seeing exactly what kind of frames we can get. Here we're getting around 170 frames per second, but this game is going to peak and trough quite a lot. In my testing of it many times before, when things get more intense, the frame rate can dip quite a lot, but it should always remain pretty high and very playable. When it comes to these side-scrolling style games, this is one of the biggest and best ones for sure. If you have eagle eyes and you can see the frame rate clearly, we are sticking well above 100 frames per second pretty much the whole way. I've not seen it fall below 100 once yet, so this is handling it very well. Now, the fan really is kicking up now and getting quite loud. Not quite as loud as something like the Odin 3, which is obnoxiously loud at times, but it's certainly audible. I don't really find the fan noise on the Retroid Pocket 6 to be very annoying. It's quite a low sound. It's not whiny by any means, so I'm okay with it, but it is just something to know that you will definitely hear the fan in a game like this. But we are getting 150 frames per second, and if we could lock this to 120, it would probably run at that most of the time and give us a nice, smooth experience. Once again, if you're okay with putting it down to 60 frames per second, you're going to have no problems whatsoever maintaining that here. Our next game, and the last one in our side-scrolling category, is Cuphead, a game that has given me wildly different results in my benchmarks before, a game that I am dreadful at, and especially bad at while trying to talk at the same time, so please excuse me while I just die about 50 times. Here the frame rate looks well over 200, which honestly I wasn't expecting it to be that great. It's running very well, it looks fantastic. With the 120Hz screen we have here, it also seems to be just running beautifully. If you have good eyesight, you may be able to read the stats at the top of the screen, and the device is certainly getting warmer now, at over 70 degrees. For the games we were playing at the beginning, the visual novels, the point-and-click games, the frame rate to my memory was in the 40s and 50s. We are now certainly getting higher temperatures. The power itself is at around 10 or 11 watts. I believe those easy games are at around 3 or 4 watts. So as we use more power, of course, we're going to generate more heat. We're going to need a louder fan. All of those things come into play here. But the experience is great. Well over 200 frames per second. So if we could clamp this down with VSync to 120 or 60 Hertz, remember you can also use the built-in frame limit inside GameHub itself as well. We should get a really nice smooth experience. And if you now look at the FPS chart, it's a super smooth straight line. So when you're playing this by yourself, I would highly recommend for all these games, you lock them to a limit, whether that's 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second, you lock it down. By doing that, you can see that the power has gone from 11 watts down to 6 watts. The temperature has dropped from around 77 or so degrees down to 60 already. And the fan noise has noticeably dropped too. But unfortunately my skills have not improved. The screen on the Retroid Pocket 6 can only show you 120 Hz or 120 FPS. So getting above that doesn't really help with anything. I'm turning off the frame per second limits because I want to show you guys what it's truly capable of, so we can see the overhead and the power. But when just playing the game, I would highly recommend turning on those limits, either in the game itself or on GameHub or whatever app you're using itself, so you're not using more power than you need to. And you can really see the benefits here in the temperature that's now dropped to 50 degrees from 70, the power we're using is halved, and the whole device is already getting quieter and cooler. And I'm sure it's going to obviously give you more battery life as well. So that's Ryan Retro's tip of the video. We're now into our next category of game, the Explorer category. The ones where we're allowed to walk around and not just confined to a horizontal plane. This is Evoland, a game that I've shown many times on the channel before, but always seems to corrupt my cloud save profile every time I try to show it on the video, so I'm always forced to start at the beginning again. You can see we're getting over 900 frames per second right now, so that's pretty good. As the game goes along, this game continually gets bigger and larger and better. You get new powers, you can do new things, and it basically takes you through the history of gaming. Starting where we are right now, in a very retro style game, you unlock things like diagonal movement, you unlock color, you unlock weapons, you unlock all kinds of abilities you can see in other games. It's really cool. So let's just see if I can hit one of these bats. Nice. We just unlocked 16-bit color. This game is honestly really cool, and for someone like me who runs a retro channel, this is like the ultimate game. Well, maybe this or Retro Grandpa. As you play through, you unlock more things like that, which are just bits of history and nostalgia about retro gaming. So this is a game I really recommend picking up. Once again, it's super cheap on Steam, which is running at around 5.6 watts, 54 degrees. If we were to limit that down to 120 hertz, the game's now only running around 3 watts, and the temperature will just start dropping as well. So a super nice, super easy game to run that looks wonderful on this OLED screen on the Retroid Pocket 6. Let's jump into another adventure game. Our next adventure game is Coromon, which you can see looks very similar to Evoland we just played. This is essentially a Pokemon ripoff. For some reason, it's not letting me show the frame per second, which is a little bit annoying. And it doesn't really seem to be running at 60 Hz. It seems somewhat laggy at times, which I'm not sure if that's just the game's art style or what's happening, because I don't think this game can really be taxing the system. It runs super quiet and cool. I don't think we're really using too much of the system's resources here. Turning on the floating FPS, it seems that we're running at around 80 frames per second, maybe 70. It's a cute little game, and if I can try and get into a battle, I can show you how it's similar to Pokemon. Here we go, we're in a battle. Instead of Pokeballs, you have spinners, really catering and really feels like they're really going for that kid market of around 2020 with the fidget spinner. My Coromon is called Cub Zero. He's a little chubby little ice ball guy. Just like in Pokemon, you have your different kinds of moves. At the beginning of the game, you get 3 different Coromon to choose from. It's basically just a massive rip-off of Pokemon, but it's super cute. Again, it's cheap to pick up, runs great here. Even though we can't see the full stats on GameHub, unfortunately, you can see we're getting around 70 or 80 frames per second, and it's not really taxing the system at all. It's running cool, it's running quiet. Something like this is going to be a great choice for GameHub on the Retroid Pocket 6. Next up we have what is, I guess, the ultimate game in this kind of genre, and that is Stardew Valley. If you look at the frame counter at the top left, it seems that it may be locked around 60 frames per second. Even though I turned the frame limit off in GameHub itself, we may have some kind of VSync going on here. There it is, let's turn that off. Even with it turned off, we still seem to be stuck at 60 frames per second. Maybe we need to restart the game. And unfortunately, once again, it seems that the HUD in GameHub has gone on vacation because it's just not working anymore. This, by the way, is my save file from my Steam Deck. I put absolute tons of hours into this with my girlfriend, and by default, when you install this through Steam, your save files are not going to synchronize. It's a bug with Stardew Valley. Thankfully, you can fix this by going into the file manager, finding where the saves are, grabbing them from your Steam Deck or your computer, and manually dragging them over. So that's what I've done here. I've got my save file, I've got my little horsey back, I've got back all my pets like Ben and Jerry. Everything's looking good on the Ryan Retro farm. I think it goes without saying that we're going to get a perfectly smooth 60 frames per second here. Once again, there's no fan noise, it's not hot, it's running nicely. You could play this game with the Android port, which I do really like, but being able to get my Steam save on this is lovely, and I will try out trying to get some mods working with this later as well. So yeah, Stardew Valley working beautifully here. And I'm also going to try and play 2-player with my girlfriend on this docked soon as well and see how that goes. I will be working on an upcoming docked video trying all kinds of different games docked with the Retroid Pocket 6 at 1080p and 4K, so make sure you're subscribed to check out that one. And if you like Stardew Valley but you think it's not British enough, then the next game, The Home County, might be for you. This is yet another game that GameHub has coerced me into buying, and I think I'm now at 11 AM on the very first day. I've owned this game for months at this point, and I've not even made it to the first night. I always pick it up, walk around chopping some trees, think, not bad, I'll come back to this later, and then start again. And I've never even made it through the first day, so I'm not sure I can really recommend this one. It doesn't really look particularly finished. There's not a lot of polish on the game, but if you like the idea of Stardew Valley in the British countryside, The Home County might be for you. As you can see, we're getting over 100 frames per second, very close to 120, but not quite getting there. So you may instead want to lock this one down to 60 to get a smooth frame rate. We are getting some volume from the fan here. It's really kicking into gear. We're getting 7 watts of power, 62 degrees. So I might lock this one down to 60 frames per second. Hopefully that will make the fan calm down. And in fact, I can hear it calming down already. The power usage will drop. The temperature will drop. I really do recommend setting these limits once you've got your game set up how you like them to 60 or 120 frames per second for a nice smooth experience. But now it's time to move up to the next level. Let's get to the medium level of games now. Our next game is Hades 2. This is a game that can fluctuate in frame rate quite a lot as many things are going on the screen. Projectiles are flying around everywhere. Yet again, it's a game I find really difficult to play and also talk to you guys at the same time. So apologies for my horrible play here. Looking at the frame rate, it's fluctuating quite a bit. It was around 120 at the beginning, now falling down into the 70s and the 80s. It's a game that I would probably recommend just locking at 60 on the Retroid Pocket 6. You may be able to find ways to play around with the settings and get around 120 frames per second, possibly, but I think overall you're going to want to lock this at 60 because it's falling down even into the 70s at times. So by locking this at 60 frames per second, you should have a pretty nice smooth experience. Our next game is Slay the Spire. This is actually probably my favorite game in the world. And for some unknown reason, it just really doesn't run well. I've tried so many different things, so many different combinations of settings, and the frame rate just cannot even hit 60 frames per second. You can see the frame chart going all over the place. The graph is dipping right down to something like 20 frames per second at times. It's just really not working very well, and I'm not sure why that is. And it even just crashed. That just proves my point. Slay the Spire, for some reason, is just really difficult to run. There is an Android port of Slay the Spire, but unfortunately it doesn't have any controller support, so that's useless. It's also available on Switch, and that's probably the preferred way to play it, to be honest. I just really wish they could get this working properly, because I've got almost 2,000 hours in Slay the Spire on my Steam account that I really wish I could use. So if anyone knows how to get this working better, please let me know. But for now, let's get into the more difficult games. From here on out, it's all 3D games, baby. First of all, we have Megabonk, one of the easier 3D games to run, but still more difficult than a lot of games we've covered so far. Megabonk has a special magical setting on it, which is the input delay setting. And if you set it to either 0 or 1, you get massively improved FPS. Now, unfortunately, I've forgotten which one that is, so we're going to test both of them, and I will let you know definitively now. So let's begin with the input delay on 1 and see what our frame per second is on average. Let's turn off the frame limit, of course, and we're getting around 50 frames per second. 50 frames per second does seem to be about the average. Now let's change that input delay setting to 0. And the frame per second has gone from 50 to about double that, to about 100. So yes, we definitely want to make sure the input delay is on 0. There's another little bonus tip for you. That one's for free. As we play and more mobs spawn in, of course the frame rate will fluctuate quite a bit, but this is one that's going to be very easily playable here on the Retroid Pocket 6. As we're getting less than 120 frames per second, I would recommend possibly locking it to 60, or just letting it fluctuate around. It's such a chaotic game that I feel that the fluctuating frame rates actually kind of suit the game. It really plays into the chaos. Sliding time, woo! I hate bees, so at this point I'm going to move on to the next game. Our next game is Need for Speed Rivals. This game is, unfortunately, locked to 30 frames per second. I featured this game in my shootout video before, and every single device could not unlock the frame rate from 30 frames per second. So unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any way to get more than 30 frames per second. And in that shootout video, it was actually quite easy to get 30 frames per second on pretty much any handheld. So here we have 30 frames per second. We're running at around 8 watts, around 59 degrees. I can hear the fans kicking up. What I'm going to do here is something unprecedented. I'm actually going to lock the screen resolution in GameHub to 30 frames per second. And maybe that will help us cool down the device a bit and get some better battery life. I'm not sure if that will necessarily be the case with this game, because we're only getting 30 frames per second anyway. So in fact, nothing may change, but it's worth just not using more than you need to when possible. It does seem that for this game in particular, locking that frame rate, as I just showed you, hasn't made a difference because it's already locking it by itself. It's just something I recommend trying and seeing if it possibly helps you get better battery life and a smoother look on the screen. So Need for Speed Rivals, 30 frames per second, as intended, working great, looking very cinematic and beautiful here. The next game on the list is the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, but unfortunately it's just not working. It was working before, but when you sit down and you film 25 games in a row like I am now, unfortunately sometimes run into things not working, and I still have a lot more games to show you, so I'm not going to waste time trying to fix this now. I will try and include this in future videos. I have shown this game loads of times on my channel before. It's been involved in shootouts and things like that you can check out. It will run fine. It'll probably run close to 60 frames per second. Once again, check out my previous shootouts and things like that to see how this game runs. Feel free to try it out by yourself. It should run. I don't know why it's not running right now. I will get to it later. Let's just move on to the next game, which once again will be more difficult to run. Our next game is Tomb Raider. Now, thankfully, Tomb Raider actually has its own built-in benchmark. So with our device set to its highest performance profile, we're going to start the benchmark and we're actually going to race it. We're going to see what is faster, the Tomb Raider benchmark, or me making one of those Korean convenience store iced coffees. Game on. What do we got? We have an Americano black, no sugar coffee. Signature. Very nice. Probably shouldn't be opening it so close to the Retroid Pocket 6, but you know, you only live once. Already got splatters on the table, very close to it. A little bit worried. I'm also not sure this is the correct size cup, but let's see. Oh, lovely. Perfect. There we go. Ready to drink. Perfect, same timing. What a great combination. And the result says minimum FPS 56, maximum 60, average 60. Getting a little bit worried, we've got some kind of VSync on there. I did turn off the frame limit, but we seem to be maxed out as 60. Ah yes, the refresh rate is explicitly set to 60 Hertz, which we can change to 120. VSync is also on double buffer. Let's just turn it off. Let's now try the benchmark again and see if we can get closer to 120 Hertz the second time around. But now I have a question once again. Another comparison. Which is faster? Running the Tomb Raider benchmark at 120 Hertz or me drinking a Korean convenience store coffee? Game on. What I will say is it's getting very loud. 80 degrees, 11 watts of power. Interestingly, the RAM usage is less than 50%, so we're not really using all of the 12 gigabytes in here. Delicious. Okay, let's see the new results. We have minimum FPS this time, 75.9 frames per second. Maximum 124.8. Average 105.8. That is very impressive. An average of 105 frames per second on a 3D game like Tomb Raider. That's really, really nice to see. So that was Tomb Raider. Let's move on to a game that should be more difficult once again. Now this next game is one of the most popular ones, and one that I can pretty much guarantee is in the thumbnail somewhere, because everyone always clicks on this one. It's Grand Theft Auto 5. A game that's so fun to just jump into and drive around and don't even follow any of the things you're meant to do. I really just like cruising around in this game, to be honest. Ever since I was a kid with GTA 1, GTA 2, GTA London, I used to just like getting in cars and just driving around. I really like to try and respect the rules. Not like I'm doing now, but when I was a kid, I was scared of the police. So I used to try to drive very, very safely and follow all of the rules. So here we're getting around 50 frames per second. It's a game that's open world. It's going to fluctuate quite a lot. We're going to get dips in heavy areas. We're going to get some really nice frame rates when not much is happening. It's a game that's pushing the limits like it does on so many devices, but it is playable. The power just went up to 12 watts, 13 watts I think I saw there. I think this is the highest I've seen so far. We're well into the 70 degrees for the temperature, and we're pretty solidly at around 50 frames per second. But depending what you do, it is going to fluctuate. It's certainly playable. And in fact, with a game like this, I may even cap the frame rate at something like 40 frames per second. That's something that I did on the Steam Deck a lot. A lot of people cap the refresh rate of the Steam Deck to 40 frames per second because it still keeps things noticeably smoother than 30 frames per second, but you get that nice, smooth frame graph that keeps things nice and fluid. So yes, this game seems to be one that runs around 50 frames per second. It's unfortunately probably not going to be a 60 plus frames per second experience here, but it's certainly going to be playable. Now we are in the hard category of games, the games that are really going to stress the system, make it work, make that fan rev up loudly. We're going to drop frames. It's going to be hard to get 30 frames per second. This is going to be the really interesting part of the video for me, because this is where we're going to push the limits. And if there's one thing I did on my Ryan Retro channel with the Retroid Pocket 5, it was push the limits and make it do more than people even imagined it could. And that's what I aim to do with the Retroid Pocket 6. So today I'm going to report to you my findings with the Retroid Pocket 6. We're not going to do very well with these games, I imagine. As you can see, we're getting around 18 to 24 frames per second. That's with a 60 frame per second frame limit, but we're not even getting close to that. We could look through the settings and try and lower them, but I believe I already lowered everything as low as it can be. So yes, unfortunately the frame rate here is not really very good. I have managed to get it up to around 30 in some places, but when more is happening, it's dipping quite a lot. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is going to be quite tricky to run here. Now, if you do find a good way to get it running, be sure to put it on my website, ryanretro.com, or on emuready.com. Both are great choices, and really just let's share the love. Let's just share the information around so we can play games like this. As it stands, I mean, technically it's playable. I've certainly played worse experiences than this when I had really shoddy old computers in the past, trying to play things like Battlefield 2, Battlefield 3, Guild Wars, and other kind of MMORPGs like that. They honestly looked worse than this. The experience was worse. The frame per second was lower than 20. It looked like a bunch of potatoes running around, kissing each other. It was odd. This is a better experience than that, and it is playable. But we're averaging around 22 to 24 frames per second, so it's not the best experience. But let's move on to even more difficult games now. The next game is Immortals Fenyx Rising. This is a game I bought for testing on the Odin 3. Even on the Odin 3, this one feels like it might be slightly too difficult to run. This is one that really will require a powerful handheld to get running. It looks beautiful. The screenshots of the game look great. They really tempted me into purchasing it. Even these screenshots here at the beginning of the game look great as well. But unfortunately, it's just not playable here. If we look at the frame per second chart at the top of the screen, we have 12 FPS, and I've not even made it to the very first marker in the game yet. Just running up these stairs, it usually either just crashes completely or reduces down like this to 5 frames per second, getting lower and lower. It's just a horrible experience, even just trying to run up a staircase. Playing this makes me feel like the beginning of Far Cry 6, where you have the option to just get on the boat, turn around, and just nope out of the whole game. That's what I want to do here. I want to just find a way to get on a boat and sail away into the sunset and not have to play at 5 frames per second. So unfortunately, this game is not going to be playable. Let's jump into a few more games and see how those also very demanding games run on the Retroid Pocket 6. Next up, we have a notoriously difficult game to run, Elden Ring. No, I'm not talking about Sir Ian McKellen's bumhole. I'm talking about the 2022 Game of the Year. Let's not forget the processor in this, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, also came out in 2022, the same year as this game. And this game was not intended to be run on mobile devices. It was made to be run on at least quite medium to high-end computers. You can see here we're actually getting around 16 frames per second. And while it's not perfectly, amazingly playable, it's a lot more playable than Immortals Fenyx Rising was. Excuse me, where did you go, sir? Oh, hello. Let's just talk to my friend over here. Very reasonable man. And looking at the frame rate at the top of the screen, we're getting around 15 frames per second. So, you know, it's not too terrible. I wouldn't say this is really super playable. I would not want to play like this, to be honest, even if it was an easy game, let alone such a difficult game like this. So, no, I don't think Elden Ring is going to, unfortunately, be playable in the Retroid Pocket 6, but 15 frames per second, not too bad. Maybe if we got some kind of further improvements in the future to emulating these games, maybe we could get closer to 30, but I think this one's probably a little bit out of the realm of the Retroid Pocket 6. This is one of the games where you're going to want to upgrade to a Snapdragon 8 Elite or a dedicated Windows or x86 handheld. But we do have one more very hard game left. When I think of games that are difficult to run, I think of Cyberpunk 2077 right away. This was in all of my handheld shootout videos, and most handhelds actually run it pretty similarly, around about 15 frames per second. Here we're getting a quite similar figure again, around 15 frames per second, maybe falling down to 10 or so, depending on where we are and what's happening. But I will say it does feel pretty choppy, even more so than some of the other devices. Now, of course, the G3 Gen 3 and the Conquer Pocket Fit and things like the Snapdragon 8 Elite are going to be much better here. Here we're getting around about, yes, 15 frames per second, but it feels very choppy. My inputs are kind of delayed. It's certainly not running very well. Oh, hello. Handsome figure of a man right there. Unfortunately, it's not going to be very playable. Now, this is one that I could see maybe be playable in the future with more developments, because over the years, we've seen lots of developments to Cyberpunk on so many devices, like the Switch and various handhelds. Like, there's a specific Steam Deck setting for this game, so it's playable pretty well on the Steam Deck. I would like to hope that this game could become more playable in the future, but for now, I don't really need to get further into this to let you know for sure it's not going to be perfectly playable. And this is right on the end of the hard scale. Like with Elden Ring and games like that, Immortal, Fenyx Rising, these ones are not really going to be perfectly playable. If you're okay playing at like 10 to 15 frames per second, like I said, I've done it in the past on my potato PCs, you can get by. You can actually play this. I mean, I'm technically playing it, aren't I? But it's not a great experience, but if I'm someone who has nothing else and no other way of playing it, it is doable. So you definitely could get by with this if it's the only choice you've got. It is actually somewhat playable. So overall, I'm actually very impressed with Windows gaming on the Retroid Pocket 6. These games at the extreme hard end, like Elden Ring and Cyberpunk, I mean, we knew they weren't really going to run, but they are somewhat playable. Like I said, you can play this. I wouldn't want to play this. I would rather play this on my Odin 3 or my Steam Deck. But if you're someone who doesn't have an Odin 3, you don't have a Steam Deck, and they're out of your budget, this is a lot cheaper than those devices, and it is somewhat playable at least. So I think it's great we can even attempt to play it on something like this, if this is all you have or all you can afford. When it comes to the lower games, Grand Theft Auto 5 runs fine. The other medium games like Skyrim, although unfortunately it didn't launch today, it does run fine. Megabonk runs fine. Hades 2, when you get even lower down like Stardew Valley, Monster Boy, Dave the Diver, Hollow Knight, Silksong, and Cuphead, they run great. And then when you get down to the really low level, those games like Coffee Talk, visual novels like Dispatch, they run really well. So you've got loads of games to play here, loads of your Steam library. GameHub has come a really long way lately. I think this is just wonderful. But please let me know in the comments below, what do you think about the Retroid Pocket 6, how it's handling these Windows games? Are you impressed? Are you disappointed? Is it what you expected? Maybe you're already a genius who knows all about the Odin series of devices and the AYN Thor, which have the same chipset. Just let me know what you think. I would really love to talk to you down in the comments. I'm very good about replying to comments. I reply to most of them. So let's have a conversation down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to buy your own Retroid Pocket 6, check out the official Retroid website in the description below. That's my affiliate link, so buying one would also help me out as well, so thank you so much for that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'm sure it won't be long before we're saying hello again.